everyone. This is Susan Givens, publisher of Auto Success. I would like to welcome you to our presentation today, Stop Interrupting and Start Engaging Customers. This webinar is brought to you by Activator DS. This 30-minute webinar will discuss the current environment that dealers like you are facing when it comes to engaging customers. You'll learn how to make your data actionable through intelligence, and you'll hear about how to most effectively deliver messaging to your customers through multiple channels. Before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. As part of the webinar, we will have a live Q&A session. Our speaker today will address as many questions as he can during the last portion of the event. But please submit your questions throughout the webinar. To improve your chances of your question being addressed, don't wait till the very end to submit them. Ask them as they occur to you. To type in your question, just put your question in the Ask a Question box, then click the Submit button. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on demand for you to view. We encourage you to direct coworkers to the recorded presentation. You'll receive an email with a link to the on-demand version in the next few days from the Auto Success website. Looking at the widget bar at the bottom of your console, you will see icons that allow you to open and close windows on your screen. When you place your cursor over any of the icons, you'll see the name of the widget. You'll notice there are icons for Twitter and Facebook, as well as an icon that lets you send an email to a friend about today's webinar. If you need help at any point during the webinar, just click on the question mark icon for some troubleshooting tips. There's also an option to print a certificate for attending today's webinar. You can access that by clicking on the yellow certification icon. And finally, if the slides stop advancing, or if you have any problems with your audio, just try pressing the F5 key at the top of your keyboard. It will refresh the webinar console on your screen. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. Our speaker today is Tim Jackson. Tim is the Director of OEM Relations for Activator Dealer Solutions, where he is focused on building the relationships between the OEM and dealer partners. Tim has had 25 successful years of automotive marketing leadership, is a multi-channel marketing expert, and is a graduate of Indiana University School of Business with a degree in marketing and a minor in psychology. With that being said, let's get this presentation started. Tim, my friend, take it away.
Thank you very much, Susan. I appreciate it. And welcome to everybody that is joining us today. I appreciate your time, and hopefully at the end of this presentation, you will gather some pearls of wisdom in regards to your marketing. Let's go forward. So our agenda today, just want to briefly go through the agenda. We're going to talk about the current environment. We're going to also talk about bad data and how to turn that bad data into opportunities, our methodology on how to utilize that data, and then also we'll go through a brief Q&A. If everybody's ready to start, let's go. So breaking through the noise. What does that mean? You know, your customers are overwhelmed with information on average and self-informed at best. What steps are you taking to break through all of that noise? Companies are all competing for our attention as consumers, not limited to other dealers, but certainly other dealers, other products and services, and they are all inundating us each and every day with messaging. And by the way, did you know, according to Forbes, a recent Forbes study, that 80% of consumers are more likely to purchase from a brand that provides personalized experiences? And to make things even more challenging, each and every consumer expects certain things based on their demographic, their lifestyle factors, and their expectations are constantly evolving. For example, a millennial car buyer may have very different expectations regarding shopping for a car than even a Gen X. So what are these considerations? The bottom line is this, is that we are competing for the most valuable asset, and that asset is the consumer's attention. And dealers must know who their customers are and what their needs are more than ever. That's a slide. All right. So what are those demographic considerations? Let's talk about each of those demographic considerations a little bit more. Specifically, the habits related to the interactions with dealerships, those expectations when it comes to marketing. So the first is that Gen X buyer. And when we talk about these three groups, I kind of categorize these three groups as the Gen X, the baby boomers, and the millennial. And these represent These age bands represent about 95% of the business that the dealers currently have. We do have Gen Z and we do have the Great Generation, but they represent a much smaller amount of business to you. So that first is the Gen X buyer. You probably already know that they are heavy users of social media. They are especially receptive to email marketing. They appreciate coupons and offers, especially when they speak specifically to life events that they may be experiencing. Not surprisingly, this group has grown up with and are very receptive to direct mail. That next group is the baby boomers. That age group is somewhere between 57 to 75 years old. They are arguably the most loyal to brands and to the dealerships. They might enjoy coming in for service and getting a cup of coffee and walking around your showroom and kicking tires. But you probably already know this, but they prefer phone conversations over text and are heavy users of social media, but in a different way than millennials and Gen X use that social media. They are more likely to tag ads as spam, and they are typically use platforms like Facebook to connect with people versus connecting with brands. Lastly, and this is the most important information about this baby boomer group, is they account for the highest dollar per transaction and are more receptive to upsells. The final group is the millennials. Now, the millennials are somewhere between 25 to 40 years old. We hear a lot about millennials all the time and already understand that they are heavy users of technology and frequent dealerships less than Gen X or baby boomers. Of course, they're heavy consumers of social media, but also pay close attention to product and service reviews. They expect near real-time responses, and phone conversations take a backseat to texting. Most importantly, they expect seamless and personalized experiences across all channels from the brands that they do business with. So this underscores the importance of dealers and their marketing partners bridging the gap between ever-evolving customer expectations and dealership goals. So what does this mean? I'm going to take a moment and just level set on how we think about the customer lifecycle and how we've designed our core products to support your customer communication and engagement efforts. You know, at any given day, and assuming a customer is in market, your customers are thinking about the product, whether that be buying a new vehicle, or maybe their brakes are squealing and they need to take it in for service. So the path that they take is first they want to get information, and then they want to find out what the price is going to be. So they want to be comfortable with pricing. Then they do a little research on the place that they want to do business, aka your dealership. And oftentimes now with social media, they can actually select the person that they want to do business with. And underneath all of that the consumers expect that information to be easy to find, it will be informative, and it will be personalized. Anything less these days misses basic expectations. Moreover, as we as consumers also expect quick responses with few strings attached. Now on the dealership side, you have got your own set of challenges and expectations. You are in one of the most competitive environments that exists. You have not only to take a break through all of that noise, but you need to do it in a way that attracts and engages while riding the fine line of pushing too far or too hard. Let's face it, the buyer really controls this process. So as we go into the details of our market approach, I will reference these past few slides that I just talked about. When a buyer is researching, we are helping to target. When they are ready to buy, we're going to help you position to sell. And when your customer is ready for service, we will ensure that you are not only thinking about it, but planning on it is finally essentially closing that gap between customers' expectations and your goals. Importantly, and especially in the time of COVID, in between these long gaps, it can be 6 to 9 months before a person comes in on their scheduled service. Additionally, it could be years between purchases. So we will continue to create an appropriate communication strategy to keep your dealership top of mind. And you can't do this by having your hand out when it is time to service or get a new car. You don't want to get into the pockets every communication asking for money. Let's talk a little bit about data. Unfortunately, dealers often miss the opportunities with consumers due to some of the most basic misunderstandings, and that is who the customer is and how to get to them, how to reach them. The good news is this, is that there are solutions available today that address both of those scenarios. And to go one step further, did you know on average about 20 to 25% of the customers residing in a dealer's database no longer own that car? That's pretty big. That's about 1/4 of a dealer's data have customers that no longer own those vehicles. And this is compounded by the bad contact information within the DMS, which averages up to 40%. But for this discussion today, we'll just put an average of 25%. So if I have 25% bad data and 25% of the customers no longer own those vehicles, 50% of my data is suspect, and I'm trying to reach my dealer goals, and that's a very, very difficult uphill battle. A recent study, the NADA in 2020, found that upward of $14 million is lost in business revenue due to poor data quality. It's a pretty big number. If you had to guess, and just take a moment, how much of your own DMS would you say is incorrect? So, how can dealers break through all of this noise? It starts first with the understanding who owns the vehicle that you have sold or serviced in the past. And more simply put, following the VIN. By following the VIN, you can actually understand first who the customer is and then deploy messaging around what else you know about that customer or the prospect. Secondly, understanding how to reach each customer is omni-important. Without relevant contact information, you simply cannot reach the customer. Lastly, by understanding the where the customer is in their own life cycle, the messaging can be tailored around their needs and expectations. By leveraging data outside of the DMS, it's possible to create incremental opportunities. The DMS is not the sole source of truth today. We can also go outside and collect additional data. And some of those data, those incremental data opportunities, create conquesting opportunities, subsequent owners opportunities, new service customers, and equity customers. There's a whole breadth of opportunities outside of your dealer's DMS. So let's talk briefly. How have evolving customer expectations and bad data affected you? I want to pause for a moment before we move forward. We discussed how to solve these marketing, these communication challenges. But so far, we've talked about the challenges dealers face in effectively engaging customers and the impacts that bad data actually has on this. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about what we look at as intelligent segmentation. I'd look at these as really the 4 pillars of success. And that is, how can, through the 3 pillars of success, through data, intelligence, and channels, how can we achieve our goals? We do this first through the methodology, and it's founded on 3 important elements. Again, data, intelligence, and multiple marketing channels to deliver relevant messaging and drive customer engagement. Data, the most important of all. If your data is wrong, then you can't move forward. Relevant data and data cleanse provide the foundation for your marketing. By following the VIN, pulling in outside data, and conducting continuous data cleanse, you're able to put a spotlight on your best customers and send messaging to across the entire customer life cycle. Data, the first moving forward, data is the most important part of this equation. The next is intelligence. Unless you can consume that data and make it actionable, then the data is really, it's nothing for you. You have to apply intelligence to data, and namely artificial intelligence and data science. This makes that data actionable to segment and target those customers with VIN-specific messaging and offers. This all works in the background 24/7 and automatically. When you turn your lights on in the morning in the dealer, it's humming along for you. When you turn them off at night, it's working for you. It doesn't get sick. That's the intelligence of working with that data and the automation component of it. And then finally, the thing that is most important to me is the channels of communication. How are we talking? By using multi-channel marketing, you can leverage your communications, deliver the correct message where customers find value. So if I want to talk to a millennial or if I want to talk to a Gen X, my path might be different, but I want to make sure that I deliver the message to both of them. This increases the likelihood that they will engage and start or continue to do business with you. And finally, the reporting. With any marketing, you need to have the reporting. You can't manage what you can't measure. And so for the reporting functionality, and more importantly, if you're using multiple vendors to accomplish your marketing strategy, the left hand isn't always talking to the right hand, and the reporting becomes somewhat cumbersome. It's good to have one ecosystem, one effort, and to be able to report on that effort so you can properly manage the performance of the marketing efforts. So you really want to shift your marketing to the next gear. And at this point, I think I'm doing pretty good on time. I want to just talk really quickly about some question and answers. Susan, do we have any questions and answers on the presentation today?
We definitely do, and I'm going to get to those in just a few moments. But before we do that, I'd love to ask everyone to please just take a few minutes to fill out our survey. The survey should be popping up on your screen momentarily. And if it doesn't launch, you can always click the survey icon in your toolbar at the very bottom. All right, Tim, let's get to those questions. The first question I have is, how can I find what percentage of the database is incorrect?
So the question is, what percentage of the database is incorrect? Well, on average, I can tell you that we find between 20 and 40% of the customers in a dealer's DMS no longer own a vehicle. And another 20% potentially have bad contact information. So, you're really working behind the scenes without that. And you want to work with a partner that actively works on the ownership verification. You want to work with a partner that is hyper-vigilant about cleansing that data. Companies like Activator, my company, is actively cleansing that data each and every month and would provide all of that information back to you once they go post-launch.
Perfect. Next question. What kind of engagement can dealers expect to see when mail is a part of their strategy?
Oh, that's a great question, and I love this question. And I've had this question before. When we combined communications, when we bring communications together, we call that feathering of the communications. And so if you think about sending out an email and only an email, or if you send out a piece of mail and only a mail, you're going to get a certain percentage of response. When I can combine the two medias together into a marketing strategy, our increase is almost 75% on mail. So when we can combine an email with the mail, we have a greater overall lift than they would as single channel communications.
Interesting. What channels do you see as being most valuable in 2021 and the near future?
The most valuable, well, I got to say, all of the channels are pretty important, guys. But what's most important? We surveyed over 200 dealers earlier this year and asked that very question about what forms of media do they find most important. And out of the 200, over the 200 dealers, about 50% of those dealers still feel that email is the most important channel to rely on for marketing outreach. In fact, when following best practices for customer segmentation and contact creation, it can certainly be one of the best performing medias. You couple that with owner verification and data cleanse strategies, and dealers can almost double their industry rate for opens. And it's a strong engagement rate if the content is relevant. And that's really important, is that it has to be relevant data. But again, approximately 50% of the dealers that we surveyed feel that email is still the most important and the most relevant media of communication.
I think you may have just answered this next question, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about it. How reliable is email these days?
Oh, well, again, email is only reliable based upon the data behind the email. The message has to be relevant, and it has to be specific to the person. If I'm sending you a communication and you no longer own that vehicle, I'm going to look pretty silly. And not only are you going to look silly, I'm really wasting my marketing dollars. And so it is important, very important, that behind the email that you're delivering it to the right person, you're delivering a relevant message, and you're not confusing the person when they receive it. Because if I no longer own that vehicle and you're soliciting me for service for a vehicle I no longer own, I'm not going to take action. So it's really important, it's the data behind the email that increases the overall response rates because it's a relevant message.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for answering these questions. I think everybody who asked the question did a great job. Thank you for being so involved. I'd like to remind our audience that a recording of this webinar will be available on the Auto Success website in the next couple days. Please feel free to log in and view it again or encourage colleagues to view it. Also, look for a follow-up email directing you to the on-demand version of this webinar. This concludes our webinar. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Tim. Thank you to our audience. Everybody have a great day.